Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey podcast for episode number 46. Or welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast, I should say. I'm sure some of you are listening for the first time, and for those of you who are, a big happy hello and welcome to a podcast that is growing, that we're seeing numbers increase every week, and I welcome you to the show. I hope it's something that you enjoy, something you find value in, and I know today's guest is going to provide some of that value by the name of Rick Vaive. Rick Vaive is somebody that I was able to watch growing up. You know, I'm 44 years old now. Rick Vaive came onto the scene in the early 80s. He was part of the 79 draft class, one of the highly regarded draft classes of all time, the 79 draft class, where he went 5th overall in that class. I think he had 76 goals as a junior in his draft year, got drafted by the Vancouver Canucks, and made the team as a young man, as a 20-year-old that next fall, where he was quickly traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs. We cover that, but he shone with the Leafs. He was there in the Harold Ballard era. He ended up scoring 50 goals 3 seasons in a row. He had 157 goals over a 231-game span, a feat that's never been completed before in Maple Leaf history. So as old as the Maple Leafs are, Rick Vaive is the only player to ever score 50 goals for that organization. That is high accolades for a player. Rick wore the captain there at 22 years old. There was some controversy with Rick throughout his career. He has talked about some of that controversy and about his career in his recent book that he just released this year called Catch-22. That by all accounts sounds like it's a great read. I haven't had the chance to read it yet. This interview came on me pretty quick, so I didn't have a chance to do some homework with the book. But I've read the reviews, and I hear it's a great read. So for anyone thinking of Christmas gifts right now, last minute ones, go out there and grab that. But Rick is he's a classy guy. You know, he tells it like it is. He's a true competitor. He played that way. He coached that way. And I think he lives that way. I think he's always fighting. He's always battling. And that comes through loud and clear in this interview. So for some of you younger players that, you know, maybe don't know the name, you should. You know, it's something that we should be aware of. Those that came before us is important. It's relevant. I know it's much easier to follow today's current players and the stars there, but the stars of yesteryears, the stars of those who were playing when maybe you weren't born, those stories matter, because it's the reason why players like Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews get a chance to play for these teams and to make the money that they're making, because guys came before them and grew the game. And yeah, we need to recognize that. And plus, I mean, there's stories from all eras that we can learn from, and Rick is an example of that, because not only did he live it as a player, did he live it as a 22-year-old captain in Toronto under the lights of that entire microscope, but he also went on to coach, and he has a lot of perspective on the game that is super valuable. So without further ado, I'm going to bring you Toronto's only 50-goal man, goal scorer of over 400 goals in the NHL. How many is it here? I got to open up my stat sheet. 441 NHL goals in 876 games. He was known as a guy that would compete. He was known as a guy who would get gritty, who would do what it takes to win, to score the goal, to get that puck out of the corner. And I enjoyed spending time with him today. So here he is, my conversation with Rick Vaive. Okay, we are live. We're back for Up My Hockey, episode 46. We have Leaf legend and my alumni winger on the podcast, 50-goal man Rick Vaive. Thanks so much for being here, Rick.
Oh, it's great. It's you know what? I mean, we don't have much to do, and I enjoy doing this, and I'm glad you reached out to me, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Great to have you. I know you're kind of like you said, we're in lockdown a little bit. The alumni events aren't happening. I know you're a big fan of them and participating in them. Really loved your energy when I was there, able to play with you over here on the West Coast. But you have a book that just came out, and you're kind of doing a publicity tour right now. Is it feel like you don't have enough hours in the day right now to get it all in?
Well, there is days where they're longer than others, and like there's sometimes where I'm on doing interviews or whatnot from like 8 in the morning until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. You get a little break in between some of them, but you know what? It's necessary because we're not getting out doing public signings and that sort of thing. So this is kind of one of the necessary things in order to help sales.
Sure, of course. Was this something you always knew you were going to do? Write the book, I mean?
Um, you know what? No, not necessarily. I started thinking about it maybe about eight years ago, and I had a lot of people asking me, why don't you? Or they wanted to write a book with me, and I said, well, no. I said, there's two things. One, I'm not going to hold back anything about my life and about my career or anything that happened during that time. And the only guy I was going to write it with was Scotty Morrison because I trust him and he's a good friend of mine. And we talked about it last fall and then met with Penguin Random Publishing House and we got it all put together and started in October and then finished the end of April. So it was a pretty long process actually.
I was going to say, I mean, that's a lot of people I know have kind of write a book on their bucket list, whether it be a memoir or whether it be an autobiography or even just a fiction novel. But it's hard to get pen to paper sometimes and to follow through and get it all done. Was that one of the bigger challenges you've had so far in your experience on this earth here?
Well, no, the only problem I had was remembering things and remembering certain dates and so on. And so I had to rely pretty heavily on my wife, Joyce. And, we're coming up on 40 years married. So um, I had to rely on her for some dates. And even my sister, who's a year older than me, had to do some digging and get some dates and facts and stuff like that.
Hmm.
That was kind of the tedious part of it, but I enjoyed every bit of it. And, I did it primarily because I wanted people to understand that, because I think a lot of people, have a thought that, you played 13 years in the National Hockey League and everything's perfect, your life was great, and now you're a multimillionaire, which is so far from the truth. And I just wanted to let people know that, if they're going through problems like I did, that you're able to overcome those challenges and get through them.
Good for you. Yeah, I mean, everyone needs inspiration. Well, especially now, right? I mean,
Yeah,
everyone's going through stuff right now, and it's a great time for that book to come out because any type of motivation, inspiration that we can have and draw from is beneficial. With the book, and we talked earlier. I mean, I just the way this interview happened so quick, I didn't have a chance to get my hands on the book, so I haven't read it. But I did read a few reviews. I did read some clips from it in the lead up here, and it sounds like you were, for lack of a better word, an open book, and you shared all, named some names and some points. Has there been any kind of, I don't know, backlash or anything that's come up from it since it's been live from either ex teammates or ex people you've been around?
no, not yet. um, uh, I haven't really heard from anybody, and nothing really has come up. And you know what, my teammates, I never really said a whole lot about my teammates because somebody asked me recently or not too long ago, uh, did you hate any of the guys you ever played with over your 13 or 14 years pro? And I said, first of all, hate's a pretty strong word, so I wouldn't say I hated anybody, but I said I can count on one hand the guys that I disliked or maybe just didn't get along with that well, and maybe because we're different people, and but I got along great with a lot of my teammates, and in the book there really isn't any negative things about any of my teammates because
Yeah.
most of it was all positive.
I can relate to that. Now that you say that, I never really reflected on it like that before, but I played on 16 different pro teams, played for 10 years, something like that. And I mean, I can't think of a guy that,
No.
that stood out as being just a huge jerk or somebody that, rubbed me the wrong way. It just seemed like we always were blessed maybe within this game to attract a type of person that, we got along with, and we all kind of respected each other in our own ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I don't know. I don't know about the other sports. I can't speak to them, I guess. But in the experience in hockey, the guys are all usually really good guys, and we all have a common goal, and that's to win. And so you go out every night, 20 guys, or in my case, when I started, we only dressed 19, and your goal was to go out and win on that particular night. And then, and back in my day, we also went out together as a team. We did everything together as a team. So I think that was probably the best part about it, was that we got to know each other, we got to trust each other, because we were out together all the time doing things and having meals and having a few cocktails, and that's kind of what brought us all together even closer.
You mentioned, I've heard you speak before about the 50 goal seasons, and I want to get into that. But just because you mentioned winning and losing and how it is so paramount, I think, in our sport. And again, maybe more so than other sports, like I would say baseball, for instance. It seems, you lose a game in baseball, it's not a big deal. There's 162 of them, right? You're going to lose some games, and it seems like the mentality about it's different. But with hockey, I remember being in junior, and I had Brian Maxwell, and that was like the first time where I was really introduced to the idea that it is not a happy place in a hockey locker room if you've lost a game. And it was like that culture was like slammed into us, like whether it was on the bus afterwards, whatever the case was, like it was not allowed to be happy. Practice was unruly, right? It was agitated. He wanted people to be mad. And from that point on, it was just sort of kept being bred in that, it's not a happy place if you're losing. Did you relate to that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was one of those things that, like you say, that baseball has 162 games. I imagine NFL is very similar to hockey because they have very few games. And we only had, when I started, we played, I think it was 78 or 76. So, yeah, I mean, every game is so important. And then, you lump everything together, and at the end of 80 games or 78 or 82, and if you haven't accomplished making the playoffs and gotten yourself set in a position where you can succeed, nobody's happy about that. And you're pretty grumpy about losing a game afterwards, and so are the coaches, for that matter. Some of the guys I had were really grumpy too.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. I think in today's game, talking with the coaches now, obviously there's still, the NHL is about winning. It's a winning league. You need to win. You need to win to get your job. You need to win for a lot of things. Put people on the stand, so you want results. That hasn't changed. But I think seems like the personalities, maybe like a bit of the culture around that has changed a little bit.
Yeah,
With as far as like how bad can we get?
Yeah, I think it's changed a little bit. I don't think it's really changed that much. I think, but coaches today are a little bit different in that, that they'll come in, and it depends on how you play too. I mean, you could lose a game, 3-2 or 2-1, but you played a great game, and it was just one of those nights where things didn't go your way. So the coach would come in and say, listen, hey guys, we played well, we can do a little bit better, but let's put this aside and let's move on and get ready for the next one. And I think that's probably, how things go today, as opposed to our day where, coaches would flip out and throw things around the room and that sort of thing. Even if you played a good game and lost, for them it was still, because they wanted to keep their job. And I always felt that way as a player myself, personally. I hated losing. I hated losing more than I liked winning, to be quite honest with you. And I couldn't, hold back sometimes. And, it was one of those things that I had in my DNA, I guess, from when I was a kid.
Right. Did you, so you went from player, hating losing as a player. I just think it's an interesting evolution, because then you're also a parent, with kids that were playing hockey, and then you're also a coach. Did you handle the win-loss scenario differently in all those scenarios, do you think?
Um, yeah, I think I did. I think with my boys, I think I didn't really get into it too much with them. I mean, I knew that they were upset that they lost, so I didn't want to, make things worse. I wanted them to know that I was there if they wanted to talk to me. We didn't really have a whole lot of conversations after games. I mean, it was not something I wanted to, critique every shift they had or something they did or didn't do. I wanted them to learn from their coaches and learn like I did and grow up loving the game and realizing when they played well, when they didn't play well, and maybe what they could have done or should have done. So I didn't get too involved. As a coach, it was a little bit different. At first, it was difficult for me because I wasn't out there on the ice doing it, and there was nothing I could do. All I could do was put the guys on the ice, and it was up to them. So that made it a little bit tougher at first. And then it got a little bit better after my first year. I realized that I had to communicate better with the players and understand what they were going through and kind of be a little bit more subtle with what the things I said and not be explosive and that sort of thing.
Do you mentioned the word, well, you alluded to self-awareness when you're talking about your boys, that you wanted them to know if they had a good game or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being able to personally be accountable to their performance. I think that's a really interesting tool for players, because you would have seen that as a player yourself, and then I'm sure as a coach, where some guys just don't have a good self-awareness toolkit, right? Like they think they had a great game and maybe they didn't. As a parent, how would you go about challenging your boys to increase their self-awareness skills?
You know what? I think mainly it was kind of like the drive home, for instance, after the game was kind of like a time for if they wanted to say anything or they wanted to ask me anything, which a lot of times they did, most of the time they did. And, if they did play a good game, I would tell them, and if they didn't play a good game, I'd say, well, I didn't think you worked as hard as you probably could have today. You didn't put as much into it as you probably should have. And I think that's why you maybe didn't have a good game. I always kind of, it wasn't so much about what they were doing as far as on the ice, it was more about how hard did you want to win and how hard did you play. To me, that was the most important thing for my kids was if you're going to play a game or you're going to play a sport, you got to put 100% into every single game. Yeah, every single game's not going to be great, but at least I expect you to give 100%.
Good for you. Yeah. Uh, I think we all, and we'd already talked about being results driven, right? In a win-loss scenario, it becomes about results and not about the process, of what actually happened on the ice. And sometimes as players, we get caught up in the goals and the assists and the results as well, instead of the process of what it takes to get those goals and assists. Because sometimes we're rewarded with points when maybe we shouldn't be, and other times we're not rewarded when we have a good effort. So when I'm talking to my players, I 100% agree, Rick, is like, yeah, take care of what you can take care of, which is your effort,
Yeah.
right? Which is your attitude, which is these types of things. And then hopefully that's going to correlate to you on the score sheet, or however it is for you to be identified as being a good player on the stat sheet.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't know, I think I was born with that, I think, to be quite honest with you. I even minor hockey when I was a kid growing up, I hated losing. And I always felt that, whatever the coaches said, um, I just felt that I had to go out and give every single ounce that I had in my body at that particular time. I wasn't worried about what I was doing as far as shooting or passing or any systems we had, which we didn't have very many, obviously, playing at that point. For me, it was all about I got to give everything that I possibly can to be the best player I can on that team and help that team win. And if I didn't feel I did that, I was disappointed in myself. And, so I knew that, okay, next time I got to be better.
That's awesome. I had a conversation with one of my clients recently about internal motivators and external motivators, you know, and when we have those intrinsic motivators like you're talking about, that when you leave the rink you're just disappointed in yourself, let alone what the coach thinks or the fans thinks or the reporters thinks or any of that crap, you know, like your biggest litmus test is yourself. And when you can grow that idea, right, of what the standards are for Rick Vaive, for instance, you know, when you hold them in such high regard, the biggest person or the last person you want to disappoint is yourself.
Absolutely, and I think I carried that on for my whole career, and then even in the coaching, it was the same thing. I was always worried about just how good I was on that particular night, how hard I played, and I didn't worry about anything else. I didn't worry about the other team or what they were doing. Although I did, it's funny. When I got traded to Chicago, we got our first sports psychologist, and we started doing these things. And then I realized that, I had been visualizing from the time I was like 12 years old. About who we were playing that particular night, the goalie, the defenseman that was playing on my side on the other team, and I carried that over into junior and then into pro, and I was able to do that. I was able to block out anything that I could hear outside, and I could hear only the coach telling us who's up, who's not up, and then when I was on the ice, that I could hear my teammates. So I don't know. I guess I was just very fortunate that I had the ability to do those things, and I carried that over. So, yeah, I didn't really, I didn't really look at everything that happened around me during a game or anything. I focused on myself and the effort that I gave and how hard I played. I knew that if I played as hard as I possibly could and did everything 100%, that I was going to have success and I was going to help the team. So, I didn't worry about what my teammates were doing or anything. I didn't get on them or say anything or anything. It was all about me being the best possible player I could on every single night. And then I knew that if that was the case, that everybody else was going to probably start to follow, and then we were going to have success.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, definitely wanted to talk about your captaincy because you wore the C there, and I assume when you're speaking, I mean, there was times where you had the C, and there was times in your career where you didn't have the C on your chest. Did you handle your philosophy there with that, your approach, whether you were a captain or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And but I've never been a stand up, yell, scream, rah rah type guy. I was always pretty quiet in the room because I was focused on getting myself ready, and I didn't want any distractions and so on. Yeah, I didn't get up and yell. There was times where I'd get up and spoke and just, matter of factly, just, it wasn't a yell or a scream. It was just like, guys, like, okay, we're only down two. We have a period and a half or 2 periods left. We can get this done. But every single guy in here has to contribute and has to go out and give 100% of whatever they have. And I said, I know that everybody isn't at the same level, but if everybody gives 100% to doing what they're supposed to do out there, we're gonna be successful. And I had some good guys, like in Toronto when I was captain. I had Boria Salming sitting right beside me who would back me up on a lot of things. And so that that's when you have success, is when teammates are willing to back you up and stand up and say, you know what, yeah, you know what, he's right. We got to give a little bit more, and when that all comes together, then you're going to have success.
I think people, and when I say people, I just mean maybe general public, people who haven't been involved in sports at a high level. I mean, in a team environment, have this theatrical movie like idea of what the captain is, right? It's the guy who stands up in the room and makes the big speech, and everyone's jumping around, and although there is a few captains I can remember like that, very rarely are they actually like that. Like it's a person that leads by example. Like you said, they're really dialed into the professionalism of what it takes for them to be their best, and that example of leadership is more so what these guys are following rather than the words of the leader. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was one myself that believed that leading by example was more important than saying anything. And So uh, I always felt if I went out and I did what I needed to do and gave 100%, that everybody on the bench or on the ice with me or whatever it might be, they're going to look at that and they're going to say, holy cow, like our captain is, he's getting banged around out there. He's going into the corners to get pucks. He's standing in front of the net, taking a lot of abuse for our power play to work and that sort of thing. I think that's more important than standing up in the room and saying anything to the players. And because I believe that if you're a leader, whether you're captain or you're one of the better players on the team, if you're going out doing that, they're sooner or later they're gonna adapt to it and they're gonna go out and do the exact same thing.
Now, as a young leader, and we've seen it, I mean, in other players, you've had the experience as being a 22-year-old captain in the NHL. That in and of itself must be different than being a 32-year-old captain in the NHL. Like, I think that there's probably more of an individual idea at that stage, right? I got to take care of myself. I can't necessarily worry about 19 other individuals on this team because that becomes a lot more of a responsibility. Can you relate to that? Like having that C at 20, I mean, we have to remember at 22, I should say, like how most of us were at 22, like that's an interesting point in a lot of people's lives. And to have the representing a team in a place like Toronto is a massive responsibility. Can you walk us through what that was like for you?
Well, first and foremost, I wasn't in a situation where I got asked to come up to the GM's room and everybody was there and they said, we'd like you to be our next captain and then let me think about it. No, Harold Ballard came to me and said, you're our captain. So I was stuck into a catch-22 situation where I didn't think I was quite ready for it yet and the responsibility that goes with it. I thought I needed maybe another year or two in the league before I could take on that responsibility. But at the same time, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking if I say no, he's probably going to trade me, and which he probably would have. And I wasn't ready for that. I didn't want to leave Toronto. I'd already been traded once, and I felt that, you know what, if I don't take it, he's going to trade me. So, I took it, and knowing full well what the responsibilities were, and especially in a place like Toronto. And again, Boria helped me a lot with that. He really did. He was a great guy to have sitting right beside me, and we would talk about it sometimes at length, sometimes just short little things. And we had an older team at the time, but then within a year, we got a whole lot younger. We brought in a lot of young players, which made it a lot easier for me because now I was 23, 24. They were 18, 19. They would listen, whereas a guy 29 or 30 would kind of sit there and go like, what's he talking about? I don't need to listen to a 22-year-old tell me what to do,
Right.
that sort of thing. And so it became easier. And again, most of it was going out and doing it on the ice rather than in the dressing room.
Right. Yeah.
And
that
the
was the
other
point
thing,
of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
the other thing that I would do is I wouldn't say much to players in the room except, I might say to a guy, let's go have lunch. And over lunch, I might, talk to him about the things that I'm concerned about with what he's doing. And rather than standing up and doing it in front of all the rest of the team, I thought it was best take the guy aside, have lunch or do whatever, and then explain what you want to get through to him.
Yeah. No, I was going to say if you had any of those quieter conversations, like it's one thing to
Yeah.
address the team as a whole, but it's another kind of to go sit beside a guy in his stall and, just kind of let him know where you see it or where you think he can help or be a better asset for the team. And it sounds like you were doing that. You mentioned your trade as a rookie. And first of all, actually, maybe we'll go even back just to touch on the draft a little bit because you were fifth overall your year. You had an amazing year in Sherbrooke, filling the net full of goals, and your draft class was ridiculous. Like what a draft year that was. And I mean, I'm not a draft day, statistician, but that must be down there as one of the best draft classes of all time, I would say.
Yeah, I think when they do, you see it on TSN or all these different stations where they all come up with the best draft years, And I think they always include the '79 draft in one of the top 10 of all time, and if not top five. So I
Yeah.
mean, when you look at the guys who were drafted that year, it was incredible. I mean, like probably 2/3 of the guys in that draft went on and had unbelievable careers, long careers, and were great players in the National Hockey League. And you know, so it's always in the top 5 or 10 when people put together those lists of the top draft years.
Yeah, I was checking it out. I mean, 1,000 gamer after 1,000 gamer after 1,000 gamer, and big names, Hall of Fame careers in there. So to be recognized in the top five of that class was crazy. And I mean, even the way it turned out, I mean, it wasn't. You were right, probably where you were supposed to be. I know your career got a little bit cut short with some injuries and stuff, but you're a hell of a player while you were there. But I wanted to touch on when you made that jump. So I mean, fifth overall at the time. Did they tell you, like, what was the communication like going into camp that first year for you to Vancouver? Did you think in your head that you were going to stick on the team? Or did they tell you were going to stick on the team, or did you have to battle for a spot there?
Um, they didn't really talk to me a whole lot about it. Harry Neal was a coach in Vancouver, and Jake Milford was our general manager, but he was sick at the time, not very healthy. So Harry was kind of entrusted with both of those roles, and he really never sat me down and said anything. I mean, all I heard was in the paper at training after camp that he said he beat me in the 5 mile run in training camp and that sort of thing, and I was out of shape. And first of all, I don't even know if Harry could have ran 5 miles back then, to be honest with you, let alone beat me. And so we kind of got off on a wrong foot because he was accusing me of all these things and partying too much and that sort of thing. And you know what? I went out a lot. I went out. Jack McElhargy had a bar in Burnaby. I lived with Glenn Hanlon in Burnaby. So yeah, I went there a lot of nights because that's where everybody was going. And not necessarily did I drink all those nights. And some nights I might have had a couple, or there was nights where I had well more than a couple. But there was a hell of a lot of nights where I went there and I didn't have anything to drink. And so I think the fact that I was there more than I should have been led him to believe that I was partying way too much. And then the next thing you know, I'm sitting in the press box watching, and then the trade happened.
Interesting, because that's one thing that you and I have in common, and that's probably the only thing, is that we both got traded in our rookie year to the Toronto Maple Leafs as 20-year-olds. So I personally was in the minors at the time. I played 19 games with Florida, and then I got traded out of the minors. I'd just been sent down, and so I was in Greensboro, North Carolina. Got the call. 2 hours later, I'm in an airport. The next day, I'm playing against the Philadelphia Flyers and Eric Lindros at Maple Leaf Gardens, and it was like the biggest whirlwind you could imagine for being 20 years old. How was that for you? I know for me it was almost too big, to be honest. Like going there to that place with that type of a microscope underneath you, who we were all traded for. How did you take that, like as a person, not necessarily as a player?
Well, first of all, when I was told I was traded, it was devastating. It really was. I mean, it was like all of a sudden all these things are going through your head. You're thinking like, am I even going to be able to stay in this league very long? And how long am I going to be able to play? I mean, I've already been traded. It's my rookie year. Then I get to Toronto, and they sat us down and said, look, you're going to get every opportunity to play a ton here, and you're going to play with good players. And they followed through with that. And then all of a sudden, Toronto's a big market, obviously. Everybody knows it's kind of the mecca of hockey in the National Hockey League. But I thrived on that. I was a guy that loved that. I loved the attention that was put on me and the scrutiny day in and day out. And I thrived on that because, that made me better because it pushed me. And well, no one was harder on anybody than myself. So the press couldn't be any harder on me than I was on myself. But that fueled me even more. I wanted to prove that, you know what, you're all wrong. And I think for me, going to Toronto was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my career because it just pushed me beyond boundaries that I didn't even know that I could get to.
Awesome. That's amazing. Can we talk about maybe that conversation and them saying about the opportunity, which was a little bit in contrast to to where like my own personal experience with coming to Toronto, because that must have meant a lot to you as a player to hear that, right? To hear not only did you get let go, you went from the devastation of being traded, but now you land in a place where they like you feel appreciated and wanted, and that you're going to get this opportunity. That must have done a lot for your self-esteem and your ego.
Absolutely. I mean, it was the best word. Like, I mean, everybody wants an opportunity. You know that everything in pro sports is about getting the opportunity. Of course, then you have to take advantage of that opportunity, and you have to go perform and do the right thing. And just to hear that, and then for them to follow through on it, it gave me the ability to grab a hold of that and take advantage of it and become what I did become in Toronto. And um, it's all about opportunity. And if you don't get an opportunity, you can't prove it. But if you're given that opportunity, well, then it's up to you as an individual to take a hold of that and become what you can be. For me, I think I became more than what I was expecting of myself. And then, of course, when that happened, then I expected more and more. And, then unfortunately, I mean, you score 53 years in a row. And then, the next 3 or 4 years, you get 30 odd goals, 40 1 year. And then, it's expected of you every single year. And that's fine. I mean, I fed off of that.
Right. Yeah, because when you got there, and I mean the stats only say so much, and it's only what I can see. But I mean, you show up there in Toronto, you get 9 goals in 22 games. I mean, that's a 40-goal year right there as a 20-year-old rookie in the league. I mean, that's a pretty great start. You must have just started rolling right from game one.
Yeah, I was. Well, I did actually. I scored 2 goals in my first game with the Leafs, and then, things went pretty good for the rest of the season, and I just felt really comfortable because, like I said, they gave me the opportunity. I kind of took advantage of it, and I said, okay, next year I gotta get better. I gotta be better than I was even last year because they've given me this opportunity, and I can't let them down. And that's kind of how I felt about myself and everything else. And then the following year I go out and get 33, and then 54, 51, 52. I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, I kept pushing myself beyond the limits that I even thought that I had.
Where does that come from? The sense of possibility, like this idea of how good can I be? Where did you learn that? Was that self-taught? How did that come about?
I think it started actually, believe it or not, it started in Pee Wee. I had a real good coach in Pee Wee who was, he had a hockey school. Alan Andrews had a big hockey school in PEI. Sidney Crosby went there. A whole bunch of guys from the Maritimes that played in the NHL went to his hockey school. He was a real thoughtful man, and he was one of the only coaches I had that would actually sit you down and talk to you like a human being and explain things to you and so on. And from that moment on, it kind of hit me that, because he talked about taking responsibility of your own play and just little things like that. I mean, and you're 12 years old listening to this guy telling you that, and you're going, like, wow. And then, it didn't really kick in for probably 4 or 5 years until I got to Major Junior. And then all of a sudden you reflect back on that and you remember that and you go, whoa, wait a minute. I remember those days when Alan talked to me about these things that I'm now facing. And then all of a sudden it just kicked in, and I said, okay, I got to follow what he told me, and I got to apply that to what I'm doing.
Good for you. Yeah, I mean, in today's language, I mean, a lot of people call that a growth mindset, right? And they actually teach growth mindset. That's something that I try and work with my clients on. And it's this idea is that we can always get better if we want to put our intention and our focus on it. And there really is no top shelf limit, but we have to believe that. And as scoring 50 goals or 30 goals, to believe that, there's something else there. How do I find that? Where do I get that from? That's a mindset thing. I mean, that's not a skill thing. That's what's between your ears, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question. I mean, the mind is so strong. I mean, it's like, I don't think people realize how strong your mind can be when you put your mind to it. I guess that's kind of a crazy way of putting it, but you got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in the ability that you have and what you're capable of. And you got, I mean, I never really set goals in that, okay, I'm going to get X amount of goals or whatever. My goals were I was going to try and be the best player on the ice every day, whether it was practice, whether it was games. That was a mindset that I had, and I carried that for many, many years, thinking that, okay, results come after the work. And, if you put that hard work in and be the best guy on the hardest working guy on the ice every practice, every game, the results are going to come. And of course, you're going to get different results based on your ability. Some guys are maybe, 15, 20 goals, but they're good checkers, they're good penalty killers. They play a physical game. Whatever the case might be, you got to understand that if you're the hardest working guy every single day in practice in the games, you're going to be able to attain the goals that you set out for yourself or what the team sets out for you, and you maybe even be able to get beyond that.
With those goals that you said, and you mentioned the hardest working player, the best player on the ice, do you mean relative to everyone on the ice, or was that yourself, or both?
No, I think it was both. I think it was I got to be the hardest working guy out of whatever 21 or 22 guys on the ice in practice,
Hmm.
and every single game I got to be the hardest working guy out of both teams on the ice. And if I do that, then the results will come after that. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, hockey and other sports are result driven, and it's no different for coaches as it is for players. I mean, you see coaches go behind the bench and they don't have results, and 2 years later they're fired. Or Todd Reardon in Washington. I mean, he was there, what, 1 year, I think, or maybe two, after Barry Trotz won the Stanley Cup with them, and basically the same team, but he couldn't get the same results out of them. So Barry had a way of getting the results out of the same players that he didn't have the ability to do. And, then he was let go very early in his coaching career in Washington. So, it was, but that's something that you had to be aware of every single day. You couldn't let your guard down for a day, or else, something bad could happen and you could have a real horrible day or a horrible game, and then that might carry over the next day. So you had to stay on top of that, and I did anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely higher stakes. You need to protect what you got for sure, and the fact that you recognize that is pretty cool. When you talk about, I've talked about hard work a bit on this platform, and I think it's an interesting topic in the sense that there's not many guys that will leave the rink, and you probably even saw this as a coach, more so maybe even as a player. Like when guys leave the rink, there's not going to be too many guys that raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm a pretty lazy player, or I didn't go hard today, right? Like that's not something that most pros would admit to. But yet, if you're sitting there watching that practice as the coach, you can pick out 3 or 4 guys that worked, like that definitely stood out as being the hardest workers.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is everyone has this different standard of what hard work means to them. How do you develop that standard for you, and how would you get that out of players to elevate their expectations for themselves and give a little more?
Communication more than anything. When I was coaching, I mean, it was one of the things I did every day. I picked 3 guys that I was going to have a conversation with that day after practice, and it wasn't necessarily all about hockey. Some of it sometimes was. I mean, if someone wasn't playing well or not working hard enough, but it was communication. It wasn't putting them down or yelling and screaming at them. It was just talking things out. It was kind of like, do you think that you worked hard enough last night in the game or in practice today? And kind of let them tell you what they think. Was my the way I approached it was like, okay, I'm going to let him tell me what he thinks, and then I'm going to tell him what I think. And more times than not, they would tell you exactly what you wanted to hear, and that was just simple communication. I think communication is the key in coaching, or even if you're a player, if you're going to communicate with one of your teammates, you got to do it in a way that it doesn't piss them off and get them angry. You got to do it in a way that they give you the answers that you want to hear. And I think that's so important. And maybe not everybody can do it. I was able to do it, fortunately, and it worked very, very well.
Just want to take a short break from the conversation to once again extend my gratitude and my thanks to all of you who are choosing to tune in today, and to share and to grow the podcast. You know, it is growing and it's happening every week, and I hear just more and more from you all sharing your appreciation and your thanks, and that just motivates me to keep going because I love it. I love the conversations. It is a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. Putting the episodes together in pre-production, the conversation itself, and post-production to try and find the guests, to make the clips and the promos. But it's all worth it for me if people are getting value from it, if young players are seeing new perspectives, if parents are able to take some of the nuggets and apply it to their own parenting or their own coaching skills. It's what it's all about. You know what I mean? It's about trying to give back to the greater good of the game and the greater good of society. And I think having people share their stories as candidly as some of my guests do, and like Rick is, there really is opportunity there for the curious athlete who wants to make inroads to the goals and dreams that they have. So thanks again, you doing your part to listen, to subscribe, to share, to talk about it with your inner circle, sharing it with your hockey teams, all makes a difference. And I'm appreciative. So at this time, this episode's being released around the holidays, 2020, during around Christmas. I am grateful. I am thankful, and continue to listen and continue to share. Well, you know what's interesting is we already talked about self-awareness, and like trying to increase a player's self-awareness, I think is a great gift as a parent or as a coach. And what you just said there, asking them to give their opinion is increasing that skill for them, making them communicate to you, what they felt inside. Maybe they were right sometimes, maybe they were wrong, but every time we flex that muscle and we put another rep in the self-awareness and the self-assessment, you're doing them a favor, because I do think that's one of the biggest ways to increase your standards as a player, is to be brutally honest with yourself, and then try and find ways, to elevate. The next thing, I just talked with David Quinn, and he talked about what you just spoke about. There is you don't want to make people mad, and you want to still be able to make people accountable. And he put it really succinctly. I thought he said one of the greatest virtues of leadership today is being able to balance likability and accountability. You want to be as likable as you can be while making people accountable. And I thought that was a pretty cool statement. It sounds like what you were trying to do, 15 years earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. It's you gotta kind of tread lightly sometimes around certain topics and certain things that you want to get across to the player. But I think the best approach is like, yeah, you know what, the one thing about coaching or parenting or whatever it might be is that you love these guys, you love these kids. You love watching them go out and compete. Same as your children. You love what they're doing. You try to raise them the best you can. And I think the best way to get anything out of them is just to communicate with them and be the best that you can be as a person to them, and then also let them talk to you and explain what's going through their mind. And maybe what they say maybe is something that you can pick up on and say, oh, okay, well, if he feels that way, then maybe I got to feel or try to approach him differently than everybody else. Because everybody's not the same, so you do have to approach every player a little bit differently.
You use the F word there, and I joke sometimes with my clients saying the F word in hockey is feeling. Sometimes, like we have to understand what it is that we are feeling. Again, with the self-awareness side, and then what to do with that feeling, right? Because we still want to harness it. We still want to be the best player we can be, and sometimes these feelings that we have aren't conducive to being the best player we can be. So it's how to manage those feelings. Do you feel you were a pretty good self-manager of whatever feelings you had, to be able to come out and be the gladiator hockey player you needed to be?
Yeah, I think I was very good at it, to be quite honest with you, and without trying to sound like I'm bragging or anything, but I think I had a real good control of my mind and my feelings and that sort of thing, and I And of course, my wife was a rock for me, and she was well educated. She went to college, I didn't, and she played basketball for the Canadian women's junior national team. So she knew exactly what I was going through, and she was a big help in a lot of ways, because we'd have some conversations, and it was fun. The funniest thing she ever said was, she goes, "I can tell when you're going to have a good game or not if you don't get knocked on your ass in your first shift. Then I know you're going to play a real good game." I thought, well, what does that mean? Like, I don't want to get knocked on my ass in the first shift. She goes, "Yeah, but if you do, you usually play really well." So, anyway, it was kind of weird, but she really helped me a lot. And I read books before I get into coaching about sports psychology, about players and how to communicate and so on and so forth. I was a good communicator already, but that just made it that much better. I was able to throw things in there that they could relate to better, but after reading those books.
On a personal level, when you talk about being able to manage your emotions or manage your feelings, whatever word we want to use for that, is I think some young players out there get caught up in the idea of what they think a hockey player is. Like, maybe a hockey player doesn't ever get scared, or a hockey player is never nervous or anxious, or whatever those kind of negative feelings are. Do you feel that, can you speak to maybe having those and then being able to do something with them? Or, like, how did you handle a scenario where maybe you were feeling something that wasn't like a positive feeling that you'd want to get rid of?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, before every game, I think there was obviously butterflies and nerves and but I don't know. I would just lay down before and relax and breathe and kind of just try to relax my mind a little bit and try not to think of everything that we were about to go out and do, and then just more or less train my mind to kind of just let it go, let it go, and then go out and do what you need to do, and and try to reassure yourself that if you do that and you just go out and do what you're supposed to do, that everything's going to work out just fine. Now, it's not that easy, and there's a lot of people that can't do that, and they get, like, I had a lot of players in Toronto, like a place like Montreal. It's not suited for everybody. Like, some people can't handle the pressure of playing in a big hockey market like Toronto. If you don't have thick skin, you're not going to get through it. And fortunately, I was the opposite. I had thick skin, and I was determined that I was going to prove everybody wrong. And I fed off that the fact that we were the biggest thing in town, and I read the newspapers. I read them. I didn't care, because whatever they said, that just fueled me to be better.
Right. You mentioned visualization earlier, that you're a little ahead of your time with that without even knowing it. Was that part of your pregame routine in the locker room? Is that something that would maybe take your mind off of some of the potential negativity and just get you focused on what it is you could do or wanted to do?
Yeah, that was a big help, and it was funny because I do it. We always had our pregame meal, then you'd lay down, have a little nap, or just a rest or something. And then when I get to the rink, I would do it again. And that was something that really was powerful for me anyway. And excuse me. Like, it kind of just eased my mind that, okay, I know who I'm playing against, what defenseman, what goalie, where to shoot, how to get around that defenseman, or the fact that he's not going to let me go wide. He's going to take that away from me. So I got to go to the other side of the ice and get lost. I mean, all those things you visualize when you get out there. All of a sudden you see yourself doing those things, and then the success comes. And then, so yeah, that really was a big tool that helped me going into a game.
Yeah, when you've seen it before, and I mean, you can even there's scientific documentation on skill acquisition through visualization, right? Like, you can actually become better by training your brain to see it and to feel it. players, I think amateur players don't quite get that when you're in the moment, especially at the NHL level, things are happening so fast. And if you're trying to think and you're trying to react, like you need to be responding in those situations. You need to have seen it before, and like you said, you've done that homework prior to. You're that split second faster on the ice, and that makes a heck of a lot of difference at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, the funny thing was, you do all this visualization that I did, and then you go out on the ice, and then all of a sudden, what you visualized that afternoon or before the game at the rink happened. And then you come back to the bench and you're sitting there and you're going, I mean, this is kind of early in the stages when you're really doing it, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, like I saw that this afternoon, what I just did. And then all of a sudden it becomes a lot more powerful knowing that, right in here, you can visualize things that actually transform onto the ice, and they actually happen.
Yeah, they manifest.
Yeah.
And plus, if you're a student of the game, you're going to see situations happen again. Like you're already saying, this one defenseman wants to cut off the boards. He wants to cut off the boards, so you know how you're going to respond to that. So the tape leaves clues, and your memory leaves clues. And guys who are students of the game, I think it definitely benefits when you put it in that toolbox with that visualization. That means a lot. You mentioned earlier the Pee Wee coach, and I want to get back to him because you said that he explained things, that he took time to treat you like a person and to really kind of give you the reason why. And I think that's been one of the big evolutions of coaching is instead of just telling guys to, drive wide, drive the net and have a high guy, like to explain why you want that to happen and to explain those nuances of the game. So there's a deeper level of understanding for the athlete. Did you take that with you as a coach?
Yeah, I did. And, I think, like, I mean, when I look back at it now, he was way ahead of his time. Because in today's game, and even a bit when I started coaching, but not as much. But in today's game, like I always kind of use the analogy that when I played, when the coach said, run through that wall, you would ask him how you did on your way back. Now, if you say run through the wall, it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, well, why do you want me to run through the wall? And what is that? How's that going to benefit me and benefit the team? And so they need to know that. So coaches today are a lot different, obviously, than they were when I played, and probably even when you played. And they have to understand that they have to explain everything to the players and the benefits of what they're telling them to do and what it's going to do for them and for the team. And that's how it is today, and it's totally different, but it's the same at the same time. The message still gets across, but just in a completely different way than it did, 40 years ago.
Yeah. I think what the message today is allowing to do, in my perspective, is it allows more personality types to respond to whatever it is that's being coached. Like there was a certain type of player that did really well, I think, in the old school version. And now in this new age version, you still have the guys that are just going to get in line and do whatever they're told. There's still those guys that exist, right? But now you're going to get those guys that are a little bit more, let's call them critical thinkers, or a little bit more, independent kind of attributes to them. And they want to know why. They want to know these whys. And I think it's okay to tell these players why. You're going to get more out of them. And if you want to win, you want the most out of everybody in that locker room.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why, like Alan Andrews, like I said, was way ahead of his time, because he was doing those things, and I'm talking about 50 years ago, not 40. And now that's how coaches approach things. And, I know that was one of the things that I did as well when I started coaching, because I took a lot of what he did and applied that to what I did. And it was kind of like, deja vu when I started thinking about it. And I started thinking about Alan Andrews, and I started thinking about our little talks and stuff like that. And I said, well, maybe that'll work with these guys. And, sure enough, I started to do that. And, lo and behold, I had some unbelievable guys with character in the dressing room, and talking to them. Yeah, some of them would ask questions. And I love that, because then I can explain to them why what I'm saying is something that's going to make them a better player, and it's also going to help the team win. That I think that's one of the things that's the hardest thing to do is explain to a player how it's going to help him and the team. You know, because I think a lot of players want to know, well, how can you help me be better? Well, yeah, I can help you be better, but we need you to be better, but we need the team to be better as well. So trying to get both of those things through players is very difficult. And I think the coaches today, I think, do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah. I think that I'm just going to pull that one spot out. You know, you're saying you as a coach want the player to understand how this is going to benefit him and the team. And just a little, tip, piece of advice to players out there. When you approach a coach, it can't be all about you and how you're going to get better. Like if you want to win a coach's heart, say, hey, I do, like, how does this, I want to be better because I want the team to be better. I want to help in this scenario to get us over the hump. I think that can't be forgotten about, even though, individuals want to get different places, but you're part of a team environment. That's what makes our sports great. And I think that you can't ever forget that when you're approaching somebody who can help you along the way, to recognize that the team is top of your mind as well as your own personal success.
Yeah, and it's funny because I got one moment that I'd like to share. That was like when I was coaching in Charleston, and we were at the top of the league. We were going to finish first overall in the regular season. And Ed Courtney, who played for me, he had played a little bit in San Jose, and but then he had kind of fallen down the ranks eventually to us in the ECHL in Charleston. And he scored 54 goals that year, had 110 points, and was like, ran our power play. He was a big guy in our power play. The second to last game of the season, he two-hands a guy across the face, gets suspended for the rest of the season and playoffs. And I remember going in the room, and I remember every single player sitting there with their heads kind of down. And we won the game, but the fact that Ed did what he did, they knew that he wasn't going to be around for the playoffs. And we had a team that had a good chance to win the championship, both the regular season and the playoffs. And I walked in, and I saw everybody kind of looking down and thinking, we're done now. We lost Eddie, and the next day at practice, Ed obviously had been suspended and he wasn't there. And I went into the room and I said, I sat everybody down. I said, listen, I understand that you guys are pretty bummed out about Eddie's suspension and where are we going to get his offense from and everything else. And I said, each individual in this room, you have to realize inside yourself and the guy next to you that each one of you, all you need to do is score one more goal than what you probably think you can in the playoffs for us to win. And that will add up to the amount of goals that Ed would have scored. And everybody kind of started looking around and looking at the guy beside them and on the other side. And then I thought, you know what? We're going to win because they're all looking at each other going, yeah, okay, yeah, this can be done. And sure enough, we went on and won the championship in the playoffs without Ed Courtney, without a guy who scored 50-some-odd goals. And that was because the character that those guys had came out. And I don't think they even realized the character that they had until that moment. And a guy like Chris Hines, who was a defenseman from Thunder Bay, we're up 3-1. We're in the fifth game, and he said, I'd block a shot with my face if I had to win this game and get this over with. Sure enough, in the game, he went down to block a shot. It got deflected, hit him right in the nose, blood everywhere. He goes off the ice. 5 minutes later, it comes out with cotton batting up both nostrils and finishes the game, and we win the game. So I think those moments are times where they look at each other and they realize, like, okay, yeah, we can do this. And it wasn't a big rah thing or anything. It was just a simple thing that I said, this is what we need to do, and you guys can do it. And look at the guy next to you, and everybody pull together. And then all of a sudden, like I said, I saw everybody going like this, and then I knew right then and there, I said, these guys get it, and they're going to win.
Yeah, a 1 degree shift in perspective can take take you different places on your journey, right? And I think that's probably what that was right there, which is pretty special. You mentioned the word character a couple of times, and this is something that I've been asking my guests of late. I love the word character. I love talking about it. I love talking about it as a skill, as something that we can develop and something we can improve. But my question is, when I say character, something in my head comes up. Like there's traits that are involved in character when I say character. When you say character, there's something that probably comes up too. If you were to break down character, or your most desirable character traits of a guy on your team, what would embody character for you?
Oh boy, there's a lot that goes into it. I don't know. I'm a believer that you develop character at a young age, and I think um, when I think of character, I think of a guy that's first of all, and it doesn't just apply to hockey; it applies to life in general. I think it's a person that's willing to go above and beyond for the betterment of himself and others. I believe it's uh, someone that will, you know, risk his himself in order for other people that he is with, whether it's business, whether it's sports, to have success. And I mean, if you get that and then you put the skill together with that character, then you've got an unbelievable person in the workplace or an athlete. And I don't think you can get any better than that. And I know people have asked me so many times about athletes versus, say just a hockey player. And I've always said, okay, if I have two players and this guy just plays hockey and he's here and the other guy's right here, but this guy's a guy who's not only a real good athlete, but he's a real character guy. You give me this guy who's a character guy, I can make him a better hockey player than the guy that just plays hockey that is a little bit better than that guy. And I truly believe that because he has the character to make people around him better, to help them, and he's a good person, and he's willing to go to any length to be the best and to win. And to me, you can't teach those things. I don't think you can anyway. I believe that that's either in you or it's not.
Well,
You can
you
help it. You can help it along a little bit, and make them a little bit better at it. But I think to get the ultimate guy character wise, I think that's something that you develop over time growing up.
Yeah, you're learning it somewhere. I mean, at some point, and
Yeah,
I
whether
can
it's
just
when you're
relate to it. Yeah, I can relate to it as myself. I mean, I think like being a parent taught me a lot of things. I think, running an organization after I got out of hockey taught me a lot of things. Like understanding for me in my head, like what it takes to be a leader and to exude character and to actually be a role model helped me develop my character. If I was just on my own and left to my own devices, I would have been a different person than it is now with the responsibilities that I have. So I know that as a 40-year-old man, I'm still continuing to grow. What you're saying, like a lot of times in the hockey world, you kind of arrive like something inside of you that just sort of makes you, and that thing that makes you stand out elevates your skill, it elevates people around you. But one of my biggest things right now as a coach is to try and get people to understand how important character is, and that to really shine a light on themselves inside so they can bring the best of themselves out for others to see.
Yeah, I think that the big thing you said there is I think that I mean parenting will bring out a lot in you because it's not easy, and obviously marriage. I mean you've made a commitment, and you have responsibilities, and I think if you don't have any responsibilities, it's very difficult to figure out what the heck you need to do to be successful. But if you have responsibilities like raising children and being married and keeping a family together, then I think your perspective on life becomes a lot better, and I think it makes you a lot more susceptible to being a better leader and a better character individual. I mean, and now at 61, I'm probably at the best place in my life that I probably ever have as far as how I feel about my life and how I feel about myself. And, you know, I mean, sometimes it might take less time than that. Sometimes it takes that long. And it took me a good, a good 35 to 40 years to really understand that, what I needed to do to be at peace with my life and what I've done and what I've got ahead of me.
Yeah. I agree. So I mean, I'm gonna poke you a little bit and say, so maybe you are more on my side of the fence than you thought, because I mean, you yourself are saying that you have been improving, and you are at a spot now that you weren't before, and so you've kind of continued to grow these traits, maybe that you exuded at 22 to 25, but now you're living in more of them, and you feel more at peace with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've lived through, 40 years of your life with a woman and with two children growing up, and now they're grown men, and they're doing very successful. So you got to look at all those things and say, okay, we did a good job.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when you're sitting down with your wife and you say, we did a pretty good job. They both got have good jobs. They're both successful. They're both well liked by all their buddies, and they have lots of friends. And when I look at that and I go, you know what, well, and when I say we, I mean more her than me, because I wasn't around as much as she was, and she did one heck of a job raising those two boys. I mean, obviously I had a part in it, but um, it doesn't happen overnight. That's
Hmm.
what I talk to people. I said, look, you're going to go through a journey. You're going to go through a long journey, and you're going to have ups, downs, good days, good times, bad times. It's how you deal with all those things. It's how you're going to come out on the other side of that. And I know myself. I had a lot of hurdles and challenges, and I've overcome them. And that's why at my age right now, uh, I finally feel like, what? I'm really, really happy. I have a grandson now, my first grandchild,
Oh, it's
16
special.
months. It's like, everything comes full circle. And now I'm at probably the most peaceful place that I've been in my entire life.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm going to transition from being at peace to you being a competitive SOB on the ice, because we haven't really talked about that. Like as a 76 goal scorer with almost 200 penalty minutes in junior, your first full year in the NHL, 229 penalty minutes. I mean, you were a guy that found his way to the box. You weren't afraid to throw the gloves. I mean, you weren't afraid to fight, but you were just, I mean, I don't know how would you classify yourself, but I was super competitive and super scrappy. I would say. Was that something that was that intentional in your mind, or was that just the way you showed up and had to show up to play your best?
No, that was just me. That was what I was. I just I got bullied a little bit when I moved to PEI when I was young, and because I was the probably the best player on the hockey team at my age group and everything else. And so at school I got bullied a little bit, but not terrible. But then I vowed to myself I'm never going to let myself get pushed around, and that's why those penalty minutes happen, because guys would cross check you or slash you, and I wasn't going to take it. I wasn't going to let them run me out of the league. And John Brophy reminded me of that when I was in the WHA as a 19-year-old. That you can't let them run you out of the league. You got to stick up for yourself. You can't let someone else do it all the time, which I didn't do anyway. And no, that was just me. That was me. I was at the point where, like, it was like, no one's going to push me around and run me out of this league. I'm sticking around for a long time, and you're not going to make me go away. And that was just the way I was as a person.
Right.
And that's the way I am with everything in life. It's like, I'm not going to let anybody take what I have away from me.
Good for you. I know for me, I was a little bit more conscious about it possibly, but I remember like every time I made a level up, like you needed to establish yourself, like you said there, like no one
Yeah.
was going to push you out of the way. So you had to make a stance to let people know that, you know what, no, yeah, this is my line, right? And my line is here. And if you're going to challenge that line, then I'm going to have to show up. And every year I had less fights kind of all the time, right? Because I didn't have to as much, right? Guys kind of figured
Yeah.
you out, and that was the way it worked for me. But I always was around the 100 pin mark myself, just because I was a bit feisty too. But did you find yourself fighting less in that scenario as you got on more in your career?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at even the first year, 50 goals, I think I reduced my penalty minutes by like 100 or more. And part of that was, I think, I think it was a little bit of the team needed me more on the ice because I was scoring goals, and obviously if I didn't score goals on any particular night, there was a good chance that maybe we weren't going to win that game. We weren't a super powerful offensive team, so I knew that I needed to be on the ice, and but I played the same way. I didn't change the way I played, and I still fought. I still stuck up for myself. I might have just did it in a different way, and I took a two-hander, and I gave one back and took a 2-minute penalty instead of 5 or 7.
Yeah.
So I didn't spend as much time in the box, which allowed me to stay on the ice a little bit more and score more goals.
Right. And you probably earned yourself a little more space, probably, right? Just from the other fact of, guys didn't want to go there anymore. They knew what they were going to get, and probably guys left you alone a little bit more potentially.
Yeah, they did. I think they got tired of breaking their hands on my helmet and face. And
Oh, that's great. I think competitive is interesting. It's something that I definitely, I want my kids, like my own personal 3 sons, like to exude it. I want my team, like when I'm coaching teams, to be known as a team that competes. Part of the problem with competitiveness, especially at a younger age, is trying to balance that desire to compete and to be the best with the occasions where it doesn't work out for you, and with the occasions where maybe you're not the top of the heap, and now maybe it's a body language thing, maybe it's whatever that thing is, the other side of not getting the results that you want. How did you balance that, one as a player, and then maybe how would you do that as a parent to talk to these guys about how to be able to balance that and be a good sport at the same time?
well, that's very difficult. I mean, that is something that you gotta kind of tread very, very lightly especially when you're talking about your children. I think in my estimation, and you know what, I think it's just, you know, you got to be firm sometimes, but then sometimes you just got to be, sit down and talk. And of course, when they're really young, you can't talk to them because they're not going to listen, or they don't understand anyway. But they get to a certain age, and then all of a sudden they understand what it's all about. They understand what playing for a team is all about, and what life is about. And then you can sit down and have conversations and explain things to them, why maybe they shouldn't do this, or they should do this instead, because it'll get them better results. And but it's hard. I don't know. It's very, very difficult to teach someone character or competitiveness. See, I really believe, yeah, you can do it a little bit, but I think someone has to have that in their DNA at the beginning in order for you to increase that a little bit and make them that much more competitive. And they're like, you take Olympic athletes, they're I'm pretty sure if you looked at and studied Olympic athletes in different sports, individual sports, team sports, they all had that when they were young. And then, of course, as they went on and got better and better and became that good, then all of a sudden, then they had access to coaches and the scientific guys and the and then all of a sudden they become that much better. I mean, they have to, because they're Olympic athletes, and I don't think NHL players or football players or any kind of athletes are any different than Olympic players, and they get into sports science and all that kind of stuff. And but I think it's something that you have in you when you're young, and then there's different ways to develop it. There's different ways to bring it out of different people. Everybody's different. There's always a different approach for each guy. Like, you have 3 boys. I bet you all 3 of them, there's probably a different way with each one of them to get the best out of them.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with what you're saying there. I mean, the one thing, maybe I'll paint a little different story. So like my middle son, for instance, like ultra competitor, right? Like in anything, right? Brushing your teeth, he wants to do it the best, like, and be the fastest or whatever the case may be. And when it comes to him on the ice, he's having a hard time balancing that competitiveness when, like I said, when things don't go well, right? Like he kind of comes unraveled when things don't go well. So him, I mean, and we're talking about a kid who's 10, right? I mean, so like
Yeah.
there's an emotional maturity and there's going to be an evolution with that. But right now he's having a hard time understanding, like he thinks if he's, for him not to get unraveled when things go badly, like his story to himself and to me is that, well, then I just can't be competitive. You know, like that's how he's matched it up. Because when I am competitive, right, like I care so much, and because I care so much, then this is going to happen to me, right? So he's
Yeah.
having a hard time finding that balance right now, and I'm just trying to help him try and figure that out, right? Because you know, we want to be a little bit even keel, but we love the fact that he's competitive. I think that's a great trait to have.
Oh, I mean, I would never try to take the competitiveness out of a 10-year-old in any way, shape, or form. I would just, I mean, the way I would approach it is I would try to, okay, mold everything around that competitive. The last thing you ever want to do is take competitiveness out of anybody, and that's not just in sports. That's just in life. But at the same time, you have to smooth the edges, I think, a little bit, and there's got to be a happy medium there somewhere where, yeah, they can still be ultra competitive, but they don't lose it when things don't go their way. And you know, you go back to a baby. You go back to my grandson's 16 months. I see him like he's trying to do something, lift something that's just too heavy to lift, and all of a sudden he starts screaming and getting mad, and I'm going, okay, you know, I like that, but at the same time, he's going to have to learn at some point that he can't do everything, and everything's not always going to go his way. And but I love the fact that, you know, he gets angry when he can't accomplish something, and to me that, you know, I wouldn't take that out of anybody. I would just try and smooth the edges a little bit and make it so that there's, you know, that moment where they say, oh, okay, I'm just about to go over the edge.
Yeah.
I've got to pull myself back a little bit,
Yeah,
and they'll figure it out with the help of parents and coaches and so on. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I again compete. My spring hockey team, I named it the compete. Like I can't think of a more valuable trait, like a human trait, valuable for life, valuable for sport. Be competitive, right? And then just figure out how to balance that, how to be a good sport, how to be respectful. I mean, in those environments, but like that compete is a way to really make yourself stand out as a player and as a person in whatever it is you wanna accomplish.
There's no question. I mean, if you don't have the ability to compete and want to be the best, then you're never going to. It's pretty simple. You're never going to be the
Right.
best lawyer. You're never going to be the best hockey player. You're never going to be the best accountant. You're never going to be the best at anything if you don't have that in you. And you know, you may be above the middle, but you're never going to be the best.
Yeah.
So I mean, unless you have that competitive juices flowing through your veins, then that's never going to happen. And you know, that's what I love about, you know, when I was coaching was I could see the competitiveness in the ones that I kept on my team. And then I had some guys that were really skilled players, but they didn't have the competitiveness, so I had to let them go,
Yeah.
you know, or trade them because they weren't going to help our hockey team. And so, I mean, that's the way I look at it too. And I it's just a thing that has to be softened and around the edges and controlled. A 10-year-old doesn't have the capacity to do that
Yeah.
by himself. With
Yeah.
help, by the time he's 14 or 15 years old, I'm pretty sure he'll have it figured out.
Yeah, no, I agree. Speaking of the best, who we get back to maybe a more specific hockey question here. Who is the best player you ever played with?
Oh, wow, I played with a lot of good players. I mean, All-Star games, Team Canada. I mean, played
Let's
with
say
one of the best
teammates.
teammates. The best player I ever played with or against, and I think maybe the best all-around player. Unfortunately, we just talked about it. I don't think he had that drive that we talked about. Was Alexander McGillney. I mean, this guy was probably the most talented player I ever played with. He could go from standstill to full speed in two strides. and handle the puck like nobody else at top speed, do things that I've never seen anybody else do. But I don't believe he had that drive in him, that that I want to be the best player on earth.
Right.
I mean, as good as he was, I think he could have been better.
Right.
Which is scary to think that he could have been better than what he was. But but guys like Wayne Gretzky, they had that. They had that competitiveness in them. And even another guy, Mario Lemieux, was probably one of the best players that I ever played against. But I mean, I know he had injuries and obviously the cancer and everything else. But when I watched him play, maybe it was because he was big and lanky and everything, but it didn't seem to me like he had that total competitiveness and drive to him either. He probably did, otherwise he never would have gotten to where he did, did what he did. But it appeared to me that he didn't, but he probably did.
Right. Yeah, that killer instinct, right? That kind of elevates and pushes you
Yeah.
forward. Mario Lemieux was my guy, and I think they called him the gentle giant. I just loved him because of his skill acquisition and like his ability to beat D-men one-on-one and goalies one-on-one was just like nothing I'd ever seen before. So I was in love with him and his game. But he was the guy who made everything look easy. Like nothing ever looked hard for him. And I think when guys when things don't look hard, it looks like, well, he's never been challenged, so maybe he's not gritty, right? I assume he had to be. He was so big, and everyone was all over him. But there's such good. I just noticed he played with Dennis Savard too, and I didn't know if his name would maybe come up because he was a heck of a player too, and he was in his prime kind of when you were with him there.
Yeah, he was pretty talented. I mean, he could do a lot of things, but I never seen anybody do as much as McGillney. I mean,
right.
This guy was an incredible, and then not to mention that, I mean, just hockey, and then I think he was a great athlete because after or at the end of his career when I was in Buffalo, my career, sorry, he took up golf. He'd never played golf before in his life, and he was a left-hander, and within a year, like he was a 2 handicap.
Yeah, that's
well,
crazy.
Who the heck does that?
Yeah.
Except for a guy who's driven and a guy who's a great athlete, and that's exactly what he was.
That's awesome. Okay, 2 questions to let you go here. I know we got a stop time, so I have a group called Up My Hockey that I let people know who I'm going to interview, and if they want to ask any questions, I let them ask. And I thought we had a good one today, so I'm going to put it on the screen here. And it's from an ex-teammate of mine, actually, Paxton Schulte. He played pro for a few years, and you might even remember him. He was part of the Flames, I believe, organization back in the day. I don't know if you were a coach there then or not. I should have looked that up. But a pro hockey player nonetheless. And I played with him in Spokane, and he now has a son that's going through it, and he's into coaching. And he says, "What are the most important hockey and life skills that you think should be taught throughout all youth hockey?" So what he meant by that was like from the novice level all the way up to midget. What's one thing that we can teach these players that's going to serve them in life and in hockey?
Well, I think we covered a lot of them already, and. I think to be the best that you can be every day, whether it's on the ice, whether it's at school, be the best person you can be every single day, and on the ice, be the best player, be the hardest working player, be the best person in school, help people, go out of your way to make someone feel comfortable by helping them and that sort of thing, and I think if you teach them all those kind of things, I think that's going to translate into them being very good young men and women going forward as they get older. I can't emphasize how important it is to teach a person to be not just competitive, but be a good person as well.
Yeah, I think that's great.
In other words, treat others like you'd like to be treated.
Sure, the golden rule, right? And I think what's a beautiful thing about team sports is that it teaches that accountability to others, right? That your example, we already touched on your example, that matters. You're accountable to other people in that locker room. You want them to be good so you can make yourself better and your team better. I think there's a lot of virtues to being involved in the team sport. I know hockey really teaches those things well. And it also teaches it well just when a coach puts emphasis on it. So I know where Paxton's coming from with that, right? If we can teach that at a young age. My last question, Rick, is is, we touched on your 50 goal seasons. We didn't get into all of your career, and that's kind of I liked not having these be typical hockey interviews. I know you probably answered those questions 100 times, so I thought maybe we'd go in a little different direction today, and hope you had a good time. But I do want to bring it back to goals. You scored a ton of goals. I mean, that's kind of what you were known for. I think that's what you took pride in. What is the one goal that is most memorable for you from all the goals that you scored?
Well, I mean, I got two of them actually. I think my first NHL goal. I mean, everybody remembers the first NHL goal if you played in the National Hockey League. I mean, it's such a special night. You get the puck and the trainer puts tape around it, writes on what it is, and then you get it, on a plaque. And then, of course, the first 50 goal season becoming, which I didn't even know until I got to about 45 goals, that I would be the first Leaf to ever score 50 goals. And I went, like, really? Like, I mean, all those great players that played here for 65 or 70 years, whatever it was, and nobody had done it. That was very special as well. So I think both of them are pretty equal because, your goal, if you're a hockey player, is to get to the NHL. And I got there, and then you score your first goal. That's the next step,
Yeah.
And then you move on from there. And then, of course, later on, 3 years later, 3 years later, I ended up being the first Maple Leaf to score 50 goals, which to me, I was so humbled and honored that I was the first person. That it was incredible.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to me, that's actually, I mean, it is insane that how long that team's
Yeah.
been around for. I mean, obviously, it's a huge accomplishment, right? I mean, 50 goals is not an easy thing to do, but you would
Well, I
just
think
think
it's
on the
just,
Toronto Maple Leafs that they would have had that done again,
yeah, and
you know?
I still think it is the standard today. I think everybody looks at 50 goals. If you could score 50, and one of the things I do believe too is if you're anybody who's multiple 50 goal scorers did it, like, there's guys that did it 1 year or maybe, whatever, and never did it again, never came close. But if you did, you could play in any era. You could take Rocket Richard, put him in the game today, put him in the 80s, he'd find a way to score 50 goals. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah,
And
I am too. I am too. And you know what was actually amazing to me is, and this may sound funny, but like when we went out together on that alumni trip, and I know you guys do a lot of that, but I was one of the youngest guys on the ice. So it was me and Nick Antropoff, I think were some of the youngest guys from the alumni side. But to see like guys like yourself, and how old are you right now, Rick?
61.
Yeah, 61 years old, ripping around the ice. Ally Afraidy, years younger than you, but like still an older
Yeah.
gentleman out there, still flying around the ice with ease, um, guys, and guys with great hands doing amazing stuff. Like, yes, the game is faster, and yes, these guys are really talented now. But I mean, you take Rick Vaive from the 80s and you put him in today's game, at the same age. I mean, you're going to have just as big of impact, if not more. You mean, like, it's just the way it is. And that era was really good hockey. My era was really good hockey, and this era is really good hockey. It's just everyone kind of evolves differently, right? With the genesis of the game, skill development, and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, if I was playing today, obviously at that age, coming into 18, I would have been training differently my whole life.
Right.
Because these guys do. So, that all kind of comes together. So that's why I think that a player in any era could do the same thing in any other decade or era, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I enjoy those games. I love playing the game still. I love shooting. I love scoring goals. That's one thing I still love doing is scoring goals. All the boys always tease me that, your arms must be sore. You took like about 40 shots. I said, well, you know what? I got to shoot 40 to score 4 or 5 goals now, as opposed to 10 to score that many when I was playing. So,
Yeah.
it's all good.
No, that's awesome. And you know what? I mean, it's total transparency by you to say that. I mean, because that competitiveness, it did come out in those alumni games that I watched. You mean,
Yeah.
like you're still playing, and you're still playing for keeps. And I mean, that's what you can't change that. You can't turn that off when it's inside, And I think that's true colors for you. And
I can,
obviously
anyway.
it got you. Yeah, right. It got you a lot of places. So Rick, I'll let you go. I know we said we were gonna cut her off here, but I mean, I really appreciate you. Amazing guest. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I know there's going to be a lot of value in it for those who chose to listen.
Well, I appreciate it, Jason, and it was great to see you in Vancouver. Hopefully, we get that opportunity again, maybe next winter.
Yeah, no, for sure. And best of luck with the book, everybody out there. Obviously, go catch 22. Lots of great stories, and from a legendary Leaf, still the only guy to ever score 50. So get it while you still have that title, because I think a lot of people think Austin Matthews might be coming up to sit beside you there with that one.
I'm pretty sure he will. And but that's fine. I mean, I felt bad for him last year when the pandemic took that opportunity away from him because if it was an injury, that's part of the game. That's you understand that. But a pandemic took the opportunity for him to reach that record and maybe tie it or break it. And I really felt bad for the kid because it was of no fault of his.
Yeah.
And but you know what? He's got a lot of years left in him, and he's a heck of a player and one hell of a goal scorer. I mean, his shot is unbelievable. I'm pretty sure he'll get there.
Cool. Well, I'm sure you'll be in the building and in attendance, and that'll be a big day for all Leafs fans. And as Gretzky says, right? I mean, they're all meant to be broken, and if we're trying to grow the game, you kind of do want that to happen at some point, and hopefully you're there to see it. I think that'd be a good day for everybody.
It would be, yes.
Awesome. Well, Rick, thanks so much again. Best of luck with your show. I know you got Jared Bednar coming on. It's so funny. We didn't even really talk about that, but you coached Jared Bednar. You also played with Dane Jackson, two past guests here of mine. And I know you got him coming on your podcast. So best of luck with Jared. He's an awesome interview, and we'll touch base again soon, man.
All right. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you so much for being here today and sticking around to the end. I really thought that conversation really picked up steam in the second half. I enjoyed where the conversation went and starting to talk about character and leadership and work ethic and standards and all these intangibles that I love to talk about. And hearing Rick talk about it so passionately is valuable, right? Because it's not a cookie cutter conversation. It's not a typical interview. And I think for you Leaf fans out there, for sure, you saw a different side of Rick than probably what you've normally heard from him in the past. So it was awesome for us to debate that topic of character. I think character, for me, I didn't hardline it in that conversation, but I think Rick was, out of one side of what he was saying that yes, we can evolve and you can change your character and you can grow it. And then the other side, he said it a couple of times, I think you are what you are. And I do think that's a interesting stance, because there are lots of people out there that believe you are who you are. And, I'm not here to argue that point. That's just a reality that a lot of people believe that to be true. I happen to be somebody that doesn't believe that to be true. And I think that we can grow it, and I think that we can change it. And there's some amazing redemption stories out there from people who have maybe gone down a wrong road and have turned around and become different people by choice with intention. Now, for most of us listening to this right now, we are probably not what we would say bad people, in quotes, right? This isn't about, I don't think character is about bad or good, but it's about recognizing the fact that it is something we can make a difference in when we apply intention to it. When we consciously make a choice about who it is, one, we are, not the choice, but recognizing who it is we are, one, and then recognizing who it is that we might like to become, two, now there's a bridge there. We can start building that bridge from one to the next. And the character piece is so relevant in hockey, and you hear it time and time again in these interviews, that people want it. They look for it, meaning management, meaning organizations, meaning coaches. They want it in their locker rooms. So this is something that is so desired. Why aren't we working on it? I mean, I work on it with my clients. I work on it with, my boys at home. I work on it personally. This is something that I think is a tool. It is a skill. It can be grown, but you have to apply intention. You have to be self-aware enough on where it is you want to improve and where you want to get better. So athletes out there, my goodness, it's available to you, right? This is a great segue, which this wasn't meant to be, but to my character course. I've developed a character course for young athletes to apply some perspective on who they are and who they can become, and give them a path for how to get there with intention, with practice. We don't work on character just during a hockey game or just during a practice. We work on it all the time. So whether you're in lockdown right now, or whether you're in school or not in school, or who knows where you're at, every day is an opportunity to get better. at that to become a better person. That's going to allow you to become a better athlete. So yeah, get in there. It's at upmyhockey.com. It's called Building Championship Character. It's one of a lot of resources. Well, actually, there's not many resources out there on character, to be honest with you, of like treating it like a skill, like something you can improve and grow. So jump in and take advantage of it. I've noticed a ton of difference in my clients when we talk about this as a skill, and in the other people that I'm around and that I'm working with. This is a game changer. It's a game changer on your journey. It's a game changer on where you want to get to, and it's also a game changer on the longevity of how long you're going to be able to stay in the sport. Not to mention that, this goes with you wherever you go in life. Nathan Gerby said in the short interview we had, which is going to come out live. We're going to redo the interview, but he was talking about we're building the house that we're living in, and I thought that was like super powerful. We're building the house we're living in. Whether you're 44, 54, or 14, you're building that house on a daily basis. And I think when we start thinking of it that way, we start approaching our decisions a little more consciously, and we can make different choices in the moment. So to everyone out there, hope you enjoyed the episode. It was great chatting with Rick. Love the character conversation. And if you got anything from this at all, please share. Please let your other inner circle know, the people who you would think would find value, and do what you can on social media to help grow the podcast. I'm in it here for a community, for everyone who wants to get better and to become the best athlete and best human that they can be. So share the wealth. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, play hard and keep your head up.